Hello, holy greetings and a warm welcome to the Keys of the Kingdom Holy Bible YouTube channel, the Keys of the Kingdom. Alleluia, I will praise Yahweh with a whole heart in the council of the upright and the assembly. The works of Yahweh are mighty, sought out by all those who long for them. My name is Christopher Sparks. I'm the translator of the Keys of the Kingdom, Holy Bible, out of which come these passages I bring before you and these teachings. So welcome to part 4. In parts 1 and 2, we looked at the divine marriage of God with his people, the sons of Israel, the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel, who are the house of Jacob, and their subsequent unfaithfulness to him, and his annulling of that marriage and divorcing, and then his later new covenant, a new marriage with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Jeremiah 31:31 and Hebrews 8:8. And in part 3 we looked at the teachings of Jesus and saw that they are the same as the teachings of Moses in Deuteronomy 24. Jesus was reinstating what had been corrupted by the religious leaders, rebuking them for their hardness of heart and saying that in the beginning it was not so. So now on to part 4, in which I'm going to be discussing 5 cases of marital status and the instructions of the Apostle Paul, and part 5 will continue that same theme with the Apostle Paul. So, 1. Paul approves marital status, each to have his or her own wife or husband. 1 Corinthians 7 verse 2. On account of fornication, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. This might give us an idea of what fornication generally means. 2. Believing spouses should remain together. 1 Corinthians 7:10-11. And to those having married I command, not I, but the Lord, a wife from a husband is not to be separated, but even if she is made separate, let her remain unmarried, or to the husband be reconciled, and a husband is not to leave a wife. So as long as those two believers, who truly are believers and have the Spirit of Jesus in them, Romans 8:9, the Spirit of Jesus and the Spirit of God, and if anybody does not have this, he is not his. Those who are born again and have the truth of the Word of God quickened to them. That is who this concerns. But if even they find it impossible to remain together because of the behavior of one of them, then they may separate, but they must remain unmarried until a death might come, and then the survivor is free to remarry. But we should never underestimate what goes on in 4 walls. When I was 18, a policeman friend of my dad's said to him, and he passed on to me, you never know what goes on inside 4 walls. I've been to the home of a local couple, and Bible believers most certainly, but I look at the wellness or otherwise of the wife, and I consider the character of the husband, and I would say it all points to him. But not only that, throughout the 1980s, before I started the big search, I was going to churches, and remarkable some of the things you find out that actually go on. So sometimes it is impossible for even 2 believers to stay together. One of them has to be rescued 3. Marriage is not advisable during persecution. Paul says it's not even worth looking for a wife or bothering to divorce. 1 Corinthians 7:26-27. I reckon, therefore, this is good on account of the present distress. Now, persecution. That it is good for a man to remain the same. Have you been bound to a wife? Do not search to be released. Have you been broken from a wife? Do not search for a wife. Now, similarly, when the prophet Jeremiah was warning the people that King Nebuchadnezzar and his army from Babylon were approaching Jerusalem, that boiling pot from the north, he called them, he was told not to take a wife because of any sons or daughters born in this place, or their mothers. They will die a gruesome death. Jeremiah 16, verse 4. So that's the context of verses 26 and 27. During the present persecution, just remain as you are. But there's something else in that you might not have noticed before. Verse 27, have you been bound to a wife? Do not search to be released. Why? Because of the present distress. That's the context. He's not disapproving of the possibility that somebody might need to leave his wife, or the other way round. Have you been broken from a wife? Do not search for a wife. So here he is not making a disapproval of divorce and remarriage. It's because of the present persecution, because they might die gruesome deaths. Have you been broken from a wife? Do not search for a wife. Have you been divorced? Don't go looking to get remarried at the moment because it's dangerous. He's not saying you are never allowed to remarry. Have you noticed that before? 4. Concerning an unbelieving spouse, verses 12-14 of 1 Corinthians 7. But to the rest I myself speak, not the Lord. If any brother has an unbelieving wife, and she consents to live with him, he is not to leave her. And the woman who has an unbelieving husband, and he consents to live with her, she is not to leave him. For the unbelieving husband is made set apart by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is made set apart by the husband, since otherwise your children are unclean, but now they are set apart. So through the believer, the children are made clean. Now, concerning I myself speak, not the Lord, Paul does say in verse 40, I think I also have the Spirit of God. And of course he was appointed as an apostle, a teacher. So he had the authority. And in Titus he speaks of telling Titus to appoint elders in other places. So he had the authority to appoint leaders himself and to give other leaders authority to appoint leaders. Paul had authority. But now concerning a believer with an unbelieving spouse, it would seem from the outside, would it not, that most, as far as we know, seem to rub along okay when an unbeliever consents to live with. But what if there's violence, bullying, betrayal, deceit, abuse? That is not consenting to live with, is it? Being forced to move out or being forced to endure nasty conditions is not consenting to live with. And in the time I worked in British law a long, long time ago, that was called, if a spouse was forced to move out, it was called constructive desertion, and was considered the same as being deserted. Whether or not that's the same now, I haven't a clue. But what we do know of British law now, or Western law, under the government of Esau, it has been made as easy as possible to divorce in order to encourage the breakup of families, the instability of children, the instability of communities, of nations, and of the entire Western world. Anyhow, to our passage. Consenting to live with, it must include safety and honour, otherwise it is not consenting to live with. And as I say, most, as far as we know, seem to rub along okay. But next time there's another passage that will speak further on that. I've omitted it tonight because it's such a big topic. 5. Sometimes Christians marry knowing that they are not, let's say, the same spiritual temperature as their forthcoming spouse or partner, and they know this, but they just think it'll all be okay. You know, she's been baptized, she comes along to church, she comes to the prayer meetings, we'll grow together, it'll all come good, or he'll come along too. And then the years go by, don't they? And nothing has happened. But we hear this a lot, you know, and believers being attracted to unbelievers. It's no good. It will only end in misery if a believer takes up with an unbeliever, knowing full well that the other is an unbeliever. But what if, what does the divine wisdom say? 1 Corinthians 7:16, how do you know, O wife, if you will save the husband? Or how do you know, O husband, if you will save the wife? Divine wisdom. Or what if one spouse gets saved and the other doesn't? Either the unbeliever starts to get agitated, restless, annoyed, or angry, or the believer starts to get agitated, frustrated, indeed bored, or both of them are agitated and frustrated with each other. Well, in that case, 1 Corinthians 7:12-13, if any brother has an unbelieving wife and she consents to live with him, he is not to leave her. And the woman who has an unbelieving husband and he consents to live with her, she is not to leave him. So as long as they are consenting to live with, and there is safety and honour and peace, I think it's verse 16, God has called us in peace, and that is in the context of marriage. Another divine piece of wisdom in verse 20, 1 Corinthians 7. So what if one gets saved and the other doesn't? Let each one remain in the position in which he or she was called. So you get saved, stay in the same position or status, as long as, of course, as it is safe and honourable and peaceful, complies with the conditions. Marriage, then. Stable and healthy marriage is for the stability and health and peace and happiness of man and woman, and for the children. But if it becomes unstable and unhealthy and nasty, God has given instructions for the rescue of abused spouses. What goes on in 4 walls? The man or woman in it is in God's care. The institution of marriage is not above the people in it, though you would sometimes think so from some teaching. As the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath, so also marriage was made for men and women, not men and women for marriage. The institution is not above the people in it, and this is clear from the release passages that we have been sensitively given. But always, of course, taking care of the children. So my purpose in these videos, as stated before, is to set the captives free. I've made the videos because I've been asked to, and so that was my, what should I say, my response. Yes, I want to set the captives free, and this means setting free the condemned and setting free the abused and setting free also those who are condemning. Those who are condemning are also in a bondage. Condemnation of others is not of God. So they need setting free too. They are captives. I spoke of them metaphorically in the previous videos as cruising on luxury liners and bashing about the rafts of the desperate. In the next video then, more on the teachings of marriage, divorce and remarriage from the Apostle Paul. Hallelujah, I will praise Yahweh with a whole heart. I do hope and pray you are finding release and peace and freedom and righteousness and forgiveness of yourselves and forgiveness and understanding of others.